Hello, welcome back. My name is Lou Jansen Dangzal, and I'm an immigration lawyer. Welcome back to IMMLight. Will, how are you doing today?
Doing very good, my friend. Very tired. It's been a busy day, a lot of announcements, but I'm grateful to be here for this show. I'm speaking today from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Kaikat Nations here in Burnaby, British Columbia.
And I'm speaking today from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations here in Mississauga, Ontario.
And we both go by gendered pronouns, he and him. Today's guest needs very little introduction. He is an immigration lawyer in Alberta who has a huge following on social media, and he's got a very interesting background.
And as I said in the previous episode, this is quite a coup that Will managed to pull off. Mark Holthe has a busy schedule, so we're very grateful to have him with us today. Will actually appeared about a month ago on Mark's YouTube show where he live streams every week.
And I understand you're going to be on his show soon as well.
Yeah, next month. I'm really excited.
Ooh. So from CBSA to the CBA, we're going to hear from Mark Holthe as we trace his career and draw inspiration from how he practices immigration law and what philosophy drives him.
Without further ado, let's welcome in Mark. Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How are you guys doing?
So I'm good. So before we actually ask you to, we dive into your background, we'd like to talk to you very quickly about today's immigration updates. Will and I were just chatting very briefly about how crazy this day has been. And I actually watched your live stream today where you talked about your thoughts on the new programs. Actually, I was just wondering, could you, in three broad strokes, talk about the implications of inviting what's deemed to be low-skilled or semi-skilled workers into Canada as permanent residents in the context of the pandemic?
Yeah. So just recently I had a meeting with the Conference Board of Canada, and they're doing some research on this. And I know what the statistics say, that usually individuals that have higher human capital have a greater likelihood of accomplishing whatever we deem as success in Canada. But I say, screw that. I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a farm. And one of the things I've said repeatedly is my father had a grade 6 education and my mother had a grade 10. And she went on and became a frontline health worker. She became an LPN. And I think of what my parents did in our community. My mother, she set up this, this mini rodeo for the kids, in our summer fairs. They volunteered. They did so much. They were the pillars of my small little rural community. And they had no master's degree or anything. So I'm sure statistics show from a financial economic standpoint that people with higher human capital have, overall general, they generally do or fare better economically, and they pay more taxes and things. But my goodness, if that's the only measuring stick that we have, well, we're missing the mark. Yes, it's important, but I love this development. So in Alberta, we already had this, really. Alberta Opportunity Stream already invited people who had a job offer that were in, NOC C and D in our province. So we have never had an issue with it. But I just love it. It is so amazing to actually reward good people who've already shown that they've been willing to invest and give their lives, literally in some cases for us. And, yeah, levels planning, who cares? Whether it's going to help the Liberals to meet their planning, whatever, I don't care. The issue is it's giving people an opportunity, and we'll see, right? There's this is bigger news than Draw 176, the Feb 13ers. It's crazy. This is going to have way larger implications than that. And CBOC, Conference Board of Canada, their National Immigration Center, they're already tracking the 176ers. That's what they're going to do, a longitudinal study to see how it plays out. So we'll find out once and for all. Is high human capital really the be-all measure for economic and otherwise success settling in Canada? We'll see. So this is exciting.
I was just saying, Mark, do you think Express Entry, I know that's your bread and butter, and you've literally built a course around that. What is the future horoscope look like for Express Entry? You think it's going to be still there, or is it going to be modified, or what do you think the future is?
I don't think it's going anywhere. I really think that this is a Band-Aid, right? At least in terms of the levels planning, trying to reach this, 401, whatever, 401,000 is what it is, but 108,000. And then we've got over 80,000 that they're trying to get through the PNPs. I think it's the PNPs that are going to be suffering, right? They're the ones that are going to be really struggling with everybody piling in through the federal program, right? So I'm curious to see. They were already kind of hit with the, with that big scoop for 176. And, I talked with the acting director of the AINP after, like, literally days after that big draw. And she said, okay, we can kind of weather this one. And they had no idea they were going to scoop that deep. And they said, we can kind of weather this one, but I'll tell you, if they do this again, some of the provinces, including us, we're going to be hurting. And I cannot see a difference between what they've just done right here and that big draw with 176. I think the consequences are going to be pretty steep for provinces. But as far as the program itself, I don't think they're really going to do much to it. They can manipulate it all they want within the existing framework. If they want to drop the scores down, they can. If they want to add on some points for having a great uncle in Canada, well, they can do that, right? So there's the flexibility built into that system, but I don't think there's going to be significant changes. But they've really been pushing French, right? They've really been pushing that advantage. And so that's where I'm curious to see where this is going to go.
No caps. That's what I was telling LJ. He utilizes French skills at this time. I wish I spoke better French or any French.
Dude, we should start like French language schools. That's where the money's going to be internationally.
Mark, if you have a video French class and on immigration, I am there. I'm
Yeah. All right. So why don't we get to know Mark a little bit, Will?
Absolutely. So before this big announcement, our whole thing too was to bring Mark on the show to really learn his story, because it is a fascinating one. And Mark, we did go through your bio in some detail to prepare for this episode because we wanted to know who you were and your story, but really a remarkable one. So maybe we can start from the beginning of that. And you alluded to it at the beginning of the episode that you are a farm boy from southern Alberta.
Yep.
And now you're working in immigration and working with migrant communities. Well, one would say that's a huge journey from one end to the other. But tell me about maybe the childhood and some of the things that inspired you along the way.
Yeah, I guess we're all built by where we came from, our roots, right? Our experiences, they shape who we are. We carry with us what our parents give us, and then the environment that we're exposed to, and in the end, the opportunities that present themselves. Sometimes it's fate, sometimes it's just darn hard work, and just good luck. Sometimes I think there's some divine intervention at times, right? But at the end of the day, for me, if someone would have said back then that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have told them they were crazy. But yeah, I'm a farm kid, and that's how I've always saw myself. Someone who's prepared to work hard when I need to, someone who believes in being 100% honest, who does not believe that money drives everything. And so I'm not influenced by those things. I guess I'm not even influenced by, I'm the national chair. Great. Well, what does that mean? Unless I'm actually using it to actually help people versus just putting on my resume, I don't care. It's meaningless. And as I've talked to a lot of people, even this year, if no one remembers who served as the national chair from, 20 to 21, I don't care. The reality is we're building something better, and it's not about me. And that's how it's always been. So initially as a kid, yeah, I started on the farm, but sports drove my life. I played everything. I loved it. I did track and field. Volleyball. I loved basketball. Was actually my biggest passion of all. And so that's what drove my ship. And I was planning on being a high school phys ed teacher. And then things happen. And you guys probably know I'm a Christian fellow. I believe in doing whatever I'm asked to do. And when I was a young kid, it was suggested that I go serve a mission. So I went and lived in Portugal for 2 years, learned to speak Portuguese, and basically was a kind of a proselyting missionary, a service missionary. And that's where I got exposed to the world. That's where this farm kid, this redneck farm kid, got exposed to what the world was like, realizing that this world is a big place and the people on the other side of the ocean are not that much different than us. And when I came home from my mission, and that was way back in '94, I knew I wanted to do something that kind of tied in where I could use my language. Ironically, I thought, well, maybe immigration, but I continued to pursue my ed degree, and I actually taught high school phys ed for a year before I went to law school. And then from there, I got a job working on the border as an immigration officer in between years of law school. And then I had the opportunity to work as what we called a pro bono slave for the hearings officers in Calgary while I was finishing up law school at U of C. Now, I graduated from U of M, but by that time I had 2 children. Oh, and I should not neglect to mention my amazing wife who's put up with me throughout this over 20 years. Like we were married in 95, Will. I'm an old dude. Like we're talking 25, and we were supposed to go before the pandemic to Israel and have this wonderful 25th anniversary. But anyways, we'll leave that for another time. But yeah, when I went to law school, I had 2 kids, and I really needed to hit the pavement running, and I had the opportunity to work as an officer on the border, and that's what opened up immigration to me. And when I came and got a job with one of the national firms, it took me just probably about 2 months before I found the right person that would support me, even as a summer student, to kind of build the immigration practice there at the time. And no one knew anything about it. So, hey, it was great. I worked as an officer, so instantly I had credibility, and they just assumed I knew way more than I actually did. And I didn't tell them different. So that's kind of how it started with my practice. It's somewhat of a whirlwind, but yeah, I'm doing what I love, you guys. I would not wish to be in a different position in my life. And I think that's pretty unique. And getting here, there's been some bumps along the road for sure. But yeah, I love what I'm doing.
It's quite the journey, and a lot of times that journey influences on how you actually do your practice. It actually brings me to my next point and question. Starting your own Canadian immigration podcast, actually, you're one of the first trailblazers, I want to say, in the field who started reaching out in social media, essentially making it more accessible, very popular. You have approximately 26,000 followers just on YouTube alone, for example.
Yeah, they're climbing. It's growing. Yeah.
That's great. So how did that come along, actually?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty simple. So in 2014, I was on the national executive for the CBA as a member at large, and they revealed or released the initial, gazette that described this new expression of interest program. And so I was on one of the working groups. We were reviewing the regs. We were providing submissions. And I got thinking to myself, and at this stage I was in, I've always been in Lethbridge, at least I didn't get into that, but I was in Calgary for a little bit working with Gallings. And then my mother was getting older and my family was down here. And so I had to pull back home, right? We often get pulled back to our roots. And so when I left Gallings, I left all my immigration and I just became a general solicitor, but very quickly it just followed me. And so, so that was kind of how things were, how my practice kind of evolved and grew. So I decided to move back to Lethbridge to be closer to family. And everyone, when I moved back, said, you can't practice immigration. And I said, okay, well, whenever someone says I can't do something, that's when it really motivates me to do it. So I said, well, to heck with that. I can do this. And so I had to be creative. And so initially, I did it the old school way. I got in my car, I drove to Calgary. Anytime there was a Canadian Institute law conference or Insight or any of them, I managed to get myself on as a speaker, and I would go there. And that's how I would build my practice, even though I was here. And then being in a smaller community at that time, there was lots of global firms that wanted Canadian correspondents to deal with the Canadian work. So I had a wonderful practice doing business immigration. But over time, the world shifted. The big four kind of took over and everything changed. And it wasn't as easy because I didn't want to join them. And so, so I was here in Lethbridge, did the reviews of the initial proposals for express entry and saw an opportunity. But I also saw this horrific thing happening for all of the Filipino community that I knew and love here in Alberta, who were going to get blindsided by this, that were not going to be prepared. And so I started off by writing blogs, the top 5 things you need to do now. Twice it crashed my website. And I realized that in all of the, once express entry rolled out, people were unaware, they were unprepared, and they weren't going to be able to qualify. And so I was trying to give them heads up in advance. And I do consult after consult with these wonderful people from the Philippines. And every time they came to my office, and I had one in Calgary, it was basically, well, there's nothing I can do for you. If you'd come to see me a year ago, I could have fixed it. So then I discovered podcasting, and I realized, okay, this is totally inefficient. And I hated charging them after telling them, well, you're basically going to have to go home. So I created the podcast so that I could amplify the message and warn people in advance. And it wasn't even designed to really promote me. It was more just coming purely from a from a standpoint of giving and helping.
Right.
And so anyways, I started the Canadian Immigration Podcast with just me talking. And it was just, okay, be aware. This is what you need to do now to prepare for express entry. It's coming. These are the changes that are going to happen. And that's how the podcast got started. And that was my first introduction kind of to the world. And I could live anywhere in podcast. It didn't matter. So that's the podcast side.
That's wonderful. Wow. Mark, I have a question. What would you tell a junior lawyer right now who is interested in doing this information sharing work, this, either podcasting, writing, blogging, but are facing from their, be it employer or whoever pays their bills, saying, get back on the billable work, show me the hours.
Yeah.
What is your advice for that? For
awesome. Move from the firm. Well, leave them. Anyone who does not see that this is worthwhile or valuable, they're not interested in you as a lawyer. They're only interested in maximizing the profits in their pocket. And let's face it, what's the purpose of a partnership? The purpose of a legal partnership, yes, it's to mentor young juniors, but really it's to maximize the profits in the hands of the partners at the end of the day. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's a business. And if you're not making money, why the heck do you do it? At least from that kind of a standpoint, right? It's such an undertaking to manage a firm. But for young lawyers, and you're trying to build your own world, especially in the pandemic, how are you supposed to, you can't go out for lunch with people. So this only just amplifies the importance of getting a presence. And Will, you're a perfect example. You guys are a perfect example. I love what you're doing. I'll support you till, as we say here, the cows come home. Like, you guys are doing awesome, awesome things. And I love your blog, Will. Like, you look at what Stephen Murins has been doing with his, just so powerful. And so it's all about giving, right? You just give. And, it's, that when you do that, people, just by their very nature, they can't help but like you, right? And when they know, like, and trust you because of the information you're giving, then they're in a position to say, I want to hire that dude, right? So I love what you're doing. And when you're putting, the profits and the finances at the back, and you're doing what's right for the sake of doing it, oh my goodness, the world is just open to you. So for young lawyers, this really is the future. And considering my background as a farmer, that's the only way I can describe it. It's like being a fruit farmer. So if you're gonna set up your nice cherry orchard or whatever, you're not gonna get any cherries that first year. Like, the trees have to grow, they have to mature. This is slow stuff. But once it does, once you've built it, and it might take, like, it took me literally 6 years, like 2014 until now, probably 2015 is when I really started doing it, until I'm now seeing the full fruits of all those labors, hours of just answering people's questions for free and just curating groups. Like, the one Facebook group I have is just crossed over 127,000.
Wow.
That is just express entry. But when it started, it was me spending 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening before I went to bed, just answering every single person's question on there. And then it grew and grew and grew to the point I couldn't do it anymore. And then I discovered from the podcast, video, Facebook Live. Yeah. And that took me off in a whole other direction. But long answer to a short question, you as a young lawyer, you take whatever you can from the place you're at. If they're forward thinking and they're willing to, look at new ways of doing that are going to benefit you, awesome, go for it. Stay with them, work with them, be patient. But if they're just shutting down, saying stupid things like, oh, don't waste your time doing that, hit the road. First, find another job before you leave, but look for an avenue where you can really grow and develop yourself.
Wow, Mark, powerful words. Honestly, I really appreciate the strong words on, cutting it out on your own. Thanks for that. And I just realized something, that we're all in small firms, like all of us are sole practitioners technically. And we're all virtual, I think, at this point. I mean, it might be circumstances out of the COVID, for example, Will. But you, Mark, I believe you've transitioned to some form of virtual office long before the pandemic did. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, so obviously being in Lethbridge, the whole nature of my practice has really been virtual for all intents and purposes. I had a few clients here, but probably about 5% of my clients were actually in Lethbridge and 95% were outside. And really, when you're dealing with business immigration, rarely do you see your clients anyways. And so when I got started, it wasn't really that big of a deal, but you look at this whole concept of virtual and cloud-based. Well, that's where we're all going. And this concept of needing to be in an office, well, you look at the big four, like very rarely do at least EY I know, and firms like that, don't even really have your own office. It's just like plugging in and going, and it's just very fluid. So those concepts are around. And we know that from an overhead standpoint, if you can cut the overhead out, well, it means that you don't have to charge the rates that you would otherwise, but it also means more dollars in your pocket. And for me, more time to be able to do pro bono work. And, and so that's a big part of what we do within our firm as well, is just pro bono work. But in December, so the story was, I've had so many different configurations of firms trying to find the right piece. And this is kind of goes to what you said, Will. I've always tried to partner. I never wanted to practice on my own, but it's always been really hard to get a junior lawyer here in Lethbridge to just join me and just do immigration, because technically it's a career limiting decision. And so I was always stuck with trying to partner with firms in Calgary, and I've had some great partners over the years, but nothing really fit right. And to the point where in 2017, in the beginning of it, I said, you know what, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do immigration, but I'm going to do other areas of the law too. And I joined a really, really nice regional firm here in Lethbridge, and a nice, beautiful corner office, the beautifulest boardrooms. And after just about 3 years, I realized, you know what, immigration is what I love. And I just decided this is where I'm going to go. And I started looking at things, and I realized that I did not need an office, period. And when I left, my 2 employees decided they were going to stay at the firm because they weren't sure if they wanted to do that. And that was December of 2019. And so I launched my firm from scratch, zero. And technology, having a good plan, an idea of what you wanted to do, and already having this platform, it gave me the footing to kind of launch. And then all the lawyers now for my firm, and I just interviewed another great candidate. I think he's going to join me. Cross fingers, having someone in Quebec with the firm.
Wow.
But we'll be 4 lawyers. And with the model, I can have anyone from anywhere across the country just plug in and be a part of the firm. And it's just, I just love it. So
that's wonderful. And Mark takes it another level. I was actually, just a small story, I was trying to send him a Christmas card over Christmas. And I know most firms, like, they have some sort of like mailing address, or they've used, like, I utilize like a space sharing where you actually like utilize a front office. I couldn't find Mark's mailing card, so I'm gonna have to give it to you hand delivered one day. But that is, I mean, he pushes the envelope in ways that I think some of us are scared to, right? There are firms that are scared to give up their downtown real estate, scared to give up a physical location or even a sign on their door.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Will, because the reality is the nature of my practice is what allows me to do this. If I was a litigator, if I did a lot of appeal work, refugee work, it just wouldn't work. Like, it would be really hard to have a virtual office without and do that kind of work. I know that everybody's been kind of pushed now, where the possibility of doing litigation, the modernization of the courts has opened the possibilities up of working in kind of out of your home, I guess. But because of the type of practice I had, that's what allowed me to do what I've done. And I'm very deliberate. I specifically work with DIYers at heart. So if someone came to me and said, Mark, I just want you to deal with my whole express entry application front to end, I'd actually refer them to you, Will or Lou. I'd refer them to you guys, because I've completely shifted the model, and my model is more collaborative or consultative than it is traditional representative. And I think I've been pushed largely because of what immigration's been doing over the last few years, and even probably I shouldn't bring it up too much, but if we look at our code, like we look at the code of professional conduct that we all sign off on, except you guys in Ontario, for most of us, we can't share our logins to the portal, the rep portal, with any paralegals. Like, we can't. That's a part of our code. But I wonder how many of the firms out there do that. So I just said, screw it. I'm not going to do this anymore. I removed all the paralegals, all the the support, the traditional legal support, and now I work directly with my clients, which I absolutely love. and they really become the paralegals. I teach them how to do it, give them access to the courses that I'm creating, and then I just review what they've done, which some people probably makes some lawyers a little bit uncomfortable, and that's totally fine. Everybody has to find what they're okay with. But for me in Lethbridge, litigation was never, the whole appeal side of things was never really an option for me. And so I've had to be creative, and yeah, so I'm pushing the envelope a little bit, I guess.
They call it the train to trainer model too. It's actually like an HR model, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful model. Mark, I do have one last question though before we hit our policy ponder party. You mentioned you're in Lethbridge. You mentioned you put family first. As someone who is going to be a dad in the next couple of weeks, and I'm scared and nervous and all those feelings. How have you been able to do it, Mark, and so well? And I see your family pictures all the time, and I'm like,
what's the secret sauce?
Yeah. Do you know what? The secret sauce is understand that you're going to be a miserable failure, that you are going to make mistakes all the time. And if you ask my kids, they would definitely not say that I was some kind of super dad. The reality is they know that I love them. They know that I own it when I screw up, and I'm not a hypocrite. And I think that's the biggest thing. So you do the very, very best to walk the talk. And as long as they can see that you're genuine and you're not just saying one thing and doing something else, then they buy into, what you're trying to teach them, to be good human beings, to care about people, to not be self-centered. And that's one thing, my kids, even when two of my oldest now have gone on missions, and both of them save their own money to go, they both got jobs. And yeah, I could have maybe helped out and contributed, and I did, but just that instilling that value of work and understanding that you're not entitled to anything. Take responsibility, stand up and make the world better, right? Because there's so much negativity out there, in the media all over about just how everything is just so awful. And we tend to gravitate to that when there's so many amazing things going on in the world. We just don't look at them. So, teaching your kids to keep a positive outlook and to work hard, boy, like you're 90% of the way there if you can do that. And I know you. I followed you, man. I can see what you've been doing with yourself. I can see
last 5 years. I have to thank you, Mark, because you were one of the ones who really invested in giving me an early platform to share my story. And I still get people, I tell Mark this all the time, that contact me because of that 2016, I believe, interview where I was just honest and raw because I was just coming out, and I was like, here's the reality of a life as an immigration lawyer. And still today it inspires people. And thanks to Mark for giving that platform.
And you guys are going to leave me in the dust. Like I'll give you about a year, and then you'll be well beyond what I'm doing. You guys have got, like, the sky's the limit. You guys are doing everything right, and just so cool. Yeah. I'm just grateful to be here on yours.
Thank you. We appreciate your stories and how you're going in deep on things. And that's what our platform is too, right? To give us a chance to step away sometimes from business and talk about things related to it, such as family, such as your faith and things that are really core to who you are. All right, LJ, do you want to introduce the Policy Ponder Party? I'm a little bit parched. That was an appeal prep all the way.
Yeah, don't you have like
8-hour appeal prep? I wish I was doing 8 hours of consultations and stuff.
That's a really nice way to round up this whole discussion on introducing Mark and getting to know him better. Honestly, I've been following Mark's career for a long time. Will's as well. We knew each other vicariously. Will and Mark, I met him officially first time in a CBA conference. I'm not sure, Mark, if you remember, but back in 2019, just before you left your firm over in Lethbridge, we spoke on the phone. We were talking about the predecessor to Clio Grow. So that was fun because, like, I felt like at that point I was a bit alone in terms of like trying to set up some things virtually, because I was transitioning from having an office to having none at all. So that was a very comforting discussion.